Today we wanted to talk about legal requirement for rental properties for you that you wanted to start your real estate investment.
Now, again, we are real estate agents. We are not in this situation. Lawyers are not your lawyers. This is on YouTube. So we're just going to basically talk about generalities that we see for legal requirements. So there are rules you have to follow. Every state you live in, every county you live in, there are certain rules. If you fail to meet the legal standards in your area, you could face legal fines. So knowing what your rules are is super important to avoid anything bad on your part. So you should know what the rules are so we follow rules because we're rule followers. So let's talk about what those rules typically include.
Exactly. Therefore, we're going to really start for habitability and property maintenance, which is the first things that we wanted to talk about, these standards for rental properties.
Right. Number one is the house has to have structural integrity. So you cannot rent a home where the roof is caving in, the walls are about to fall down, the floor beneath them is going to fall down. It has to be structurally sound with no danger involved. What's the second one?
The second one is electricity and water, meaning that the tenant must have access to running the water and electricity.
It does not mean that you necessarily have to pay for these things, but you have to make sure that they have access to them, which means they can pay the water company and they pay the electric company, and maybe some states require you to pay one or the other, or neither or both. So that's a state rule, but basically you definitely have to make sure that they have access to these things. So you're not just giving them a kerosene lamp like a fire and saying, go live in the hut. No, it has to have a way. They have to be able to at least be able to turn the lights on if they need it. Hi, it's Alan Victoria. Welcome to our channel and podcast.
And if this is your first time in our podcast and YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe and get notified.
Also, you call text all the time, 252-327-3357. We love talking to you. Don't be shy. Also, grab our buyer's guide and seller's guide in the description below. You like my example?
Next thing we wanted to talk about heating and cooling, which is having adequate heating in the winter and in some cases cooling in the summer. Again, depends on the area and which part of the country they are living. They need to have access and is required by the standard.
Now, it does not have, it's the legal standards in your county. So it might just be that they can open the windows. I don't know what the legal standards are in your area. Maybe it's in Florida where you must have HVAC, heating and air conditioning where it's be able to run all the time. But you have to be able to know what the rules are to follow the rules. And typically having access to air is like electric. You should have access. Okay. Next one
is sanitation facilities. That property must have access to the waste disposal system and be free of whatever should be free of.
Bugs.
Infestation.
Okay, so basically with sanitation, you want to make sure that the toilets will flush and we're not sending people into the forest again in order to use those things. I'm just making my husband laugh with my examples. So next thing is safety.
Safety requirement, exactly. Therefore, really we're going to start with the smoke and the carbon monoxide detector. Installation and maintenance of them are required by the law and jurisdiction, and you need to be aware of that.
The next thing we're going to talk about is lead paint. If the house is constructed before 1978, you must disclose that there might be lead paint. So we have to disclose lead paint in older homes. What's another one?
The next one is the fire safety, basically ensuring that what it is for the fire extinguisher, they have access to that. And also alarm system typically required based on where you're living.
Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is fair housing and discrimination. These are bad things. So we want to make sure we're rule followers. We don't do these things. So we want to make sure the Fair Housing Administration says you cannot discriminate based on race, color, religion, sex, nationality, family status, or disability, which I know you wouldn't, but those are the rules. Next one is what?
Next one is a reasonable accommodation, means based on the law requirement that you have the reasonable accommodation for the tenants that they are with disabilities.
Right, so if the person has a wheelchair and it's a first floor unit, making the doors a little wider might be something that is reasonable so they can actually use the apartment building and otherwise and that. So let's just talk about landlord entry rights is next. So, can I come inspect my property if I am the owner? Yes and no. You have to give notice. Exactly. You have to give notice. Typically 24, 48 hours. It can be more, it can be less, depending on what the situation is. Of course, emergencies don't require notification. If the water is flowing, we need to stop the water immediately. So that's an emergency situation if the water heater is breaking. But otherwise, if it's necessary, you need notice. What are those?
Exactly. Therefore, pretty much for those that are necessary items like repairs or maintenance, or if you are showing the property to prospective future tenants or the buyers, if you want to sell your investment.
Right now, with repairs and maintenance, you are allowed to send in maintenance crews to inspect as well to make sure that there is nothing that somebody's not reporting and that you can handle your property cleanly. But you have to give notice for that. Now, moving on, these rules are not typically in our market in Greenville, North Carolina, that I know of at this moment, filming of this video. However, they are national places where other places in the country have these things. So we're going to talk about them because you never know what the future might hold. So the first one is rental registration. What is that?
Exactly. Rental registration, as my wife says, some cities require landlord to register each rental units for that. No?
The next one is building permits, housing permits. Some have to say that your house has to have certain standards on inspections to be done by permits and the government. What's the next one?
The next one actually is landlord license, which is interesting. For some certain location, they mandate that the landlord have a valid license and also a fee for the property inspection.
A fee and a property inspection. Okay, last thing we want to talk about is security deposits, really. Tenants have the right, as we said to you before, tenants do have the right to privacy, so you cannot enter without notice. That is, again, 24 to 48 hours, unless, of course, there is an emergency. Water heater is broken is my example, but it can be other situations. If something's broken, we need to fix it right now. Of course, that is an emergency. Other than that, it's going to be security deposits. That's what I said we were going to talk about. So how does that work?
Exactly. For security deposit has a limit, and you need to pay attention which state you're living. Many states actually they have a limit amount that how much you can charge for the deposit from the tenant.
Some states are going to require that this money be held in escrow, which is going to be in a separate bank account. And what about that returning of the money at the end?
The return, typically landlord must return actually the deposit within a specific time frame. And when the tenant move out from the property. No?
Now let me go back to handicap and reasonable accommodations for a little bit. The Americans with Disabilities Act basically mainly applies to public spaces. It can influence rental properties, especially in common spaces, but it is not necessarily about the house in and of itself. So know that there is that. Now let's talk about modifications, though.
Exactly. Therefore, modification. There is an exception, like people with the disability. When you have a tenant with a disability, they may actually make the necessary modification to the property, to the unit, and also when they leave, they need to restore the property in its original condition upon their moving out.
Last thing we're going to talk about is just going back to disclosures a little bit. I already talked about lead. There's a couple more that we should kind of quickly discuss as well. One of them is going to be mold. If there is presence of mold, you must inform your tenants that you are taking care of the mold. So that is a bad thing. What's the other one?
The other one is asbestosis, no?
Asbestos.
Sometimes I have issue with saying that asbestos. Similar to lead paint, also this is the present of the material can be disclosed to, because according to research it might cause a lung cancer.
So if you are thinking about being an investor, I would recommend trying to understand all the specific rules and situations in your area, because rules can vary by a lot. So if you are in the Greenville area, we're happy to send you to people we know, but if you're out of the area, I would recommend talking to an attorney or someone in this area that knows a little bit more. We can send you to people if you need one as well.
Exactly. Don't forget to call us at 252-327-3357, Alan Victoria Pinder, real estate agent in Greenville, North Carolina, and watch this video. And we wanted to be in touch with you. Thank you.